In the world of high-stakes private equity, invisibility was Margot. No, not Margot. She was in the list. Invisibility was the armor that Blythe. No, let me check names properly first. In the world of high-stakes hedge funds, the most dangerous thing a woman could be was useful without being seen. Wren was in the list. Sloane was in the list. Celeste, taken. Let me silently confirm my chosen names don't appear. Ottiline Tilly Voss, female lead 29, and Cad Morrow, male neither appears in the list. Supporting, Anselm, Enforcer, Birdie, Friend, Waverley, Rival. All clear. In the world of high-stakes hedge funds, the most dangerous thing a woman could be was useful without being seen. Ottiline Voss had spent 6 years perfecting both. She went by Tilly, had since college, since a roommate took one look at her name badge during orientation and said absolutely not with the affection of someone who intended to keep her around. The nickname stuck. The invisibility stuck harder. In the marble and glass tower of Morrow Capital on the 43rd floor of One World Trade, Tilly was the woman who knew where every file lived, which counterparty would fold before noon, which regulatory window they had exactly 11 days to exploit before it closed. She was 32 spreadsheets deep into a refinancing deal on any given Tuesday morning, always first in, rarely acknowledged, and that was, she told herself, exactly how she preferred it. She was also, by the metric of every glossy magazine stacked in the lobby, the wrong shape for this building. Not that anyone said it. No one in finance said anything directly anymore. They said it in the way Morrow's senior partners scheduled client dinners and never included her name on the invite. They said it in the way the new analyst, 24, effortlessly thin, recently promoted, got a glass-walled office while Tilly still worked at a corner desk with a view of the server room. They said it in the way Cade Morrow himself, founder and sole managing partner of the most feared fund on the eastern seaboard, walked past her station every single morning for 6 years and said nothing at all. Not good morning, not good work on the Hensley filing, not a single word. She was, to Cade Morrow, furniture, and furniture, Tilly had decided somewhere around year 3, did not require eye contact. What furniture did require was precision, so she gave him that instead. Every model she built was cleaner than it needed to be. Every memo she drafted was tighter than he asked for. When the Halstead acquisition nearly collapsed over a zoning technicality that 3 senior attorneys had missed, it was Tilly who found the exemption. Buried in a 2009 municipal ordinance, at 11:30 on a Friday night, emailed it to the team without fanfare. Cade had gotten the credit in the press. She'd gotten a $200 grocery store gift card from HR at Christmas. She kept it. She spent it on good coffee and told herself it didn't sting, it stung. But that was the arrangement, and she understood arrangements. She understood them the way she understood actuarial tables and risk-weighted asset calculations, coldly, completely, without the luxury of pretending they were something else. What she did not understand and had never planned for was the night the building's East Wing server room caught fire, the elevators locked down on a security protocol, and the only other person trapped on the 43rd floor with her was Cade Morrow himself. It started, as most disasters in finance did, with something small going wrong at the worst possible time. Tilly had stayed late, not unusual. The Delancey restructuring was closing in 72 hours, and one of the Luxembourg subsidiaries had an unresolved tax exposure that kept surfacing in her models like a splinter she couldn't locate. The rest of the floor had emptied by 7. By 9, the cleaning crew had come and gone. By 10:15, it was just her and the hum of the HVAC, and the city 43 floors below, glittering and indifferent. She heard him before she saw him, the particular cadence of Cade Morrow's shoes on marble, unhurried and deliberate, the walk of a man who had never once in his life needed to rush because the world rearranged itself around his schedule. She didn't look up. She was used to the sound. Sometimes he worked late too, behind the closed glass of his corner office, and she moved through the floor around him the way water moves around a stone, efficiently, without touching. Then the fire alarm went off. Not the gentle 2-tone advisory chime, the full system, The one with the strobes, the pre-recorded voice, the mechanical grind of the emergency doors sealing at the stairwells. 3 stairwells locked. The 4th, the north exit, showed a sensor fault on the panel by the elevator bank, and the elevators themselves had gone to emergency hold, which meant they sat frozen at ground level and would not move until the fire marshal cleared the system. Tilly had stood at the panel for 45 seconds, reading the status lights with the same focus she brought to a corrupted spreadsheet, before she registered that Cade Morrow was standing directly behind her. "The server room?" he said, looking past her at the readout. "East wall. There's an overloaded circuit. The maintenance team flagged it last week. Did anyone fix it?" A pause. "No." She looked at the fire suppression status. The room's halon system had activated. The actual fire, if it was a fire and not just heat triggering the sensor, was almost certainly already contained, but the building's security protocol didn't know that. It just knew. Alarm active, floor locked, nobody moves until the all clear comes from outside, which, at 10:23 on a Thursday night, could take a while. "How long?" he asked. For the fire marshal to clear it. She did the mental math. After hours response, assuming no actual structural damage, minimum 90 minutes, could be 3 hours. Another pause. Longer this time. "The conference room has water," he said finally, "and the good chairs." It was, she realized, the most words he had ever said to her that weren't about a deliverable. The conference room was the large one, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked south over the harbor. The emergency lighting had kicked in, lower wattage, warmer toned, turning the polished table and the leather chairs into something that looked almost human. Tilly sat at the far end with her laptop and her Luxembourg problem. Cade sat near the windows with his phone and whatever occupied the mind of a man worth $4 billion at 10:30 at night. For 40 minutes, neither of them spoke. She was used to silence with him. The silence was familiar. The silence was, in a strange way, the closest thing to comfort she had in this building. What was not familiar was when he set his phone face down on the table, leaned back in his chair, and said without looking at her, "The Delancey subsidiary." It wasn't a question. She looked up. "I found a potential exposure in the Luxembourg holdco. Article 56 application may not be as clean as the original filing suggests. How bad? If the assessment authority challenges it, 12 to 18 million, probably closer to 12. She paused. "I'm also looking at a restructuring pathway that eliminates the exposure entirely. It requires moving the booking entity before the close, which is tight, but it's doable." He was watching her now in a way he almost never did, directly, without the distracted quality of a man already thinking about the next thing. It was unsettling. She had grown comfortable being peripheral to his attention. This felt like standing in a beam of light she hadn't asked for. "Why didn't you flag this in the team meeting Tuesday?" he asked. "I wasn't in the team meeting Tuesday, a beat." "You weren't." He stopped. Something moved across his face that she couldn't quite categorize. "The 10 o'clock. I'm not on the Delancey team officially. I've been supporting the model build because Anselm asked me to cover while Sorensen is out." She kept her voice even. "I send my analysis to Anselm. He presents it." The silence that followed was different from the earlier one. This one had weight. "For how long?" Cade said slowly. "Has that been the arrangement?" It wasn't really a question either. But she answered it. "The Halstead deal, that was first. About 2 years ago." She watched him absorb this. He had very good control of his face. It was one of the things that made him effective in negotiations, that absolute stillness. But something was happening behind it. A recalculation, the kind she recognized because she ran them herself constantly, the quiet addition of information that changed the shape of what you thought you knew. "The Halstead exemption," he said. "The municipal ordinance. Yes, that was you. Yes." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone, set it down again, and did something she had never once seen Cade Morrow do in 6 years of proximity. He looked like he didn't know what to say. They talked for 2 hours, not about Delancey, not at first. It started with Delancey and moved. the way conversations do, late at night, in rooms with no exits, into other territory. She told him about the Luxembourg pathway, and he asked the right questions, sharper than she expected, and she found herself not simplifying her answers the way she did with most of the senior team. He didn't need her to. He was, and she was recalibrating constantly as they spoke, significantly more technically proficient than his reputation suggested. The reputation was all vision, all instinct, all the mythology of a man who made calls by feel. The reality, sitting across a conference table at midnight, with the harbor lights below them, was someone who understood the architecture of what she was building and wanted to understand it better. At some point, they stopped talking about the deal. She wasn't sure who moved first. She thought later it might have been her. Some shift in posture, some moment when she stopped sitting like someone about to be dismissed and just sat like a person. He had brought water from the small credenza. They were both tired. The emergency lighting had a quality that made the room feel less like an office and more like the place between places, the hour that doesn't count. He asked her where she'd gone to school. She told him. He told her his mother had been an actuary. She used to say risk is just a story, he said. People treat it like math, but it's always a story about the future. She's right, Tilly said. The math is just how we tell the story in a way that people without imagination can follow. He looked at her then with an expression she had absolutely no category for. You've been here 6 years, he said. Yes. And you've been routing your analysis through Anselm, through whoever needed it, Anselm, the senior associates, wherever it was useful, because you didn't. He stopped himself. Started again. Did you think no one would listen? The question was direct enough that she felt it in her sternum. She took a breath. Outside, the city was doing what it always did, continuing, indifferent, infinite. I thought, she said carefully, that the work would speak for itself eventually, and in the meantime, it was better to be useful than to be noticed. Why better? She looked at him, at the line of his jaw in the low light, at the tiredness around his eyes that he almost never let show, at a man who had walked past her desk for 6 years and never once stopped. Because being noticed, she said, has costs. He was quiet. Then for whom? And she, because it was late, and they were locked in, and she had spent 6 years being careful, said, for someone who looks like me, in a place like this, you do the math. She regretted it immediately. It was too much, too direct, too exposed. She started to pull it back, to smooth it into something professional, and then she noticed that he wasn't looking away. He was very still, in the way he got when he was thinking hard, and his eyes were on her face with an attention that was, she realized with a low thud of alarm somewhere beneath her ribs, completely real. I owe you an apology, he said. You don't need to. I owe you approximately 6 years of apologies and a significant correction to your compensation structure. A pause. The apology is harder. I don't know how to give it in a way that means anything. Tilly looked down at the table. Back up. You could start, she said, by telling me whether the Luxembourg pathway is going to work. Something shifted in his face. Not a smile exactly. More like the place where a smile comes from, the thing underneath. Walk me through it again, he said. All of it. So she did. The all clear came at 1:47 in the morning. The fire marshal's crew had confirmed it. Overloaded circuit, Halon suppression had worked, no structural damage. Systems back online in sequence. The elevators unlocked with a mechanical sigh. The lights on the floor came back to full wattage, too bright, making everything feel sudden and ordinary again. Tilly was saving her files when Cade came to stand at the end of her desk. Not his desk, hers. This had never happened before. The close is Friday, he said. I want you presenting the Luxembourg analysis directly, not through Anselm. She looked up. That's a short turnaround. Can you do it? Yes, obviously. Good, he paused. The overhead light was back to its usual clinical white, and he looked, for just a moment, like he didn't want to leave the emergency lighting behind, any more than she did. Go home, Tilly. Get some sleep. It was the first time he had ever used her name. She picked up her bag and walked to the elevator and stood very still the entire ride down. not letting herself think about the way it had sounded. She did not sleep well. She lay in her apartment in Astoria. A good apartment, she'd made sure of that. High ceilings and a kitchen she actually used, and stared at the ceiling and did what she always did when something threatened to destabilize her. She took inventory. She listed what she knew for certain and set aside what she didn't. What she knew, the Luxembourg restructuring would work. She'd run the numbers 4 more times in her head and they held. The presentation was manageable. Her analysis was solid. What she did not know, what any of the rest of it meant, whether the conversation in the conference room was just the particular intimacy of late nights and no exits, the kind of thing that evaporates in morning light. Whether Cade Morrow had simply recalibrated her professional utility and nothing else, whether the way he'd said her name meant anything at all, or whether she was doing the thing she had very specifically promised herself she would never do, which was take the warmth of temporary attention and construct something from it that wasn't there. She was 32 years old. She had been smart her entire life. She knew exactly how many times being smart had protected her from being foolish. And the answer was, not as many as it should have. She went to sleep just before 4. She was at her desk by 7:15. Anselm found her at 8. He was a tall man, mid-40s, the kind of handsome that had been very useful to him in rooms where snap judgments happened. He had also, she knew now with full clarity, been presenting her work as collaborative for 2 years without ever specifically lying, just never specifically correcting the assumption either. "Cade wants you on the Friday presentation," he said, leaning against the edge of her desk with an ease that suggested he was fine with this. He was not fine with this. "The Luxembourg piece." "Yes, I know. He wants you to lead it. I know that too." A beat. Anselm was recalibrating the same way everyone recalibrated when the furniture started having opinions. "The counterparty team is from Zurich. They're going to want details." "Good," she said, not looking up from her screen. "I have them." He stood there for another moment and then left, and she let out a breath that she hadn't been fully aware she was holding. She didn't see Cade for most of Thursday. His schedule, she knew from the shared calendar she'd managed for 2 years without acknowledgement, was back-to-back. LT calls in the morning, a board session after lunch, a legal review in the late afternoon. She built her presentation and didn't think about him with the focused discipline of someone diffusing something. Then at 4:50, an email arrived. From C. Morrow to O. Voss subject. No subject, the Halstead municipal filing. I pulled the press coverage from when it closed. Your name isn't in any of it. She stared at this for a long time. Then she typed back, "No, it isn't." His response came in under a minute. "It will be, going forward." She read it 3 times. Then she closed her email, pressed the heels of her hands against the desk surface, and breathed. The Friday presentation went well. That was an understatement. It went the way things go when you have been doing them, in secret, for years and have finally simply been permitted to do them in public. The Zurich team had questions. She had answers. At one point, the counterparty's lead attorney, a precise silver-haired woman named Hofstadter, who looked like she had been successfully skeptical of every single person she'd met since 1987, leaned forward and said, "Where did you come from?" And Tilly said, "I've been here 6 years." And Hofstadter made a sound that was not quite a laugh, and not quite an apology, but landed somewhere between the two. Cade said almost nothing during the presentation. He sat at the head of the table and watched her the way he'd watched her in the conference room during the lockdown. With that complete, deliberate attention, the kind that felt like being taken seriously. It was, she was discovering, a very specific sensation. She wasn't entirely sure she'd felt it before. After, when the Zurich team had left and the senior associates had filtered out in pairs, she was packing her materials when she heard the door close behind her. She turned. Cade was standing with his back to the closed door and his arms folded, and the expression on his face that she had seen for the first time 2 nights ago in the emergency lighting, the one she still didn't have a name for. "You didn't negotiate," he said. "Excuse me." When I told you I wanted you presenting, you didn't ask for anything in exchange. Better title, better comp, acknowledgement of prior work. Nothing. She considered this. You said it was happening. There wasn't room to negotiate. There's always room. You run a hedge fund. You know sunk cost when you're looking at it. She met his eyes. The prior work is done. It's not recoverable. Fighting over credit for it doesn't change the model. It changes what people they owe, she said. In my experience, they pay what they value. He was quiet for a moment. The city was doing its afternoon thing outside, the particular golden hour light that hit the harbor and bounced up the glass of the building in a way that made everything look warmer than it was. I value it, he said. I want that to be clear. She held his gaze. The work, and the person doing it. Tilly had built a career on not flinching, on reading situations clearly, without the distortion of hope. She was very good at it. She had been good at it for years. She realized, possibly not going to be as good at it as she'd thought. Cade, she said. Tilly. She could feel the precise, familiar weight of 6 years of being overlooked sitting in her chest, and she could feel new, unfamiliar, alarming, the weight of the last 48 hours sitting right alongside it. They were very different things. She had spent a long time being an expert on the first one. I need to know, she said, whether this is a recalibration of my professional utility or something else, because I can work with either. I just can't work with the wrong answer. He crossed the room, not fast, deliberately in the way he did everything, like a man who had decided something and was simply acting on it. It's something else, he said. It's been something else for longer than I should have let it be without saying so. She looked at him, at the lines of his face, the steadiness of his eyes, at someone who had not, she realized, walked past her desk for 6 years without noticing, who had simply, she saw it now, rearranging itself in her memory, been very good at not letting himself look. You could have said something, she said. I know. He didn't look away. I was wrong not to. It was not, she thought, a declaration. It was not a fairy tale moment with perfect lighting and a soundtrack. It was 2 people in a conference room at 5 o'clock on a Friday, one of them with a lot of ground to make up, and the other deciding with open eyes whether to let him. She had always been good at risk assessment. She looked at him for a long, full moment, and then she said, The Delancey close is Monday, yes. I'm going to need the weekend to finish the subsidiary filing. I know. And then, she said carefully, we can talk about the other thing. Something moved through his face. Relief, maybe, and something that looked like it had been compressed for a very long time. Monday, he said. Monday, she agreed. She picked up her materials and walked to the door, and he stepped aside, and she went through. She did not look back. She didn't need to. She already knew he was watching. The filing took most of Saturday and part of Sunday. She worked from her kitchen table with good coffee and the window open, and the distant sound of the neighborhood doing its weekend things below. When she submitted the final documents at 6:42 Sunday evening, she sat for a moment in the quiet of her own apartment and thought about a woman who had spent 6 years becoming indispensable in the dark, and whether that woman was allowed to want more than that. She decided she was. Monday, the Delancey deal closed cleanly. At 3 o'clock, Cade sent an email to the full fund, partners, senior associates, operations, legal, that contained a single paragraph announcing a restructuring of the research and analytics function, the creation of a new director of strategic analysis role, and the name of the person appointed to it, her name, her full name, Ottoline Voss. At 3:04, she got a text from a number she didn't have saved. Coffee, 4 p.m. The place on Fulton you go to every morning. I've been noticing for a while. She read it 3 times. Then she typed back, You're buying. At 4 o'clock exactly, she walked into the coffee shop on Fulton Street. Small, slightly scuffed. The kind of place where they knew her order and spelled her name wrong on the cup every single time, and Cade Morrow was already there, standing at the counter, looking like a man who understood very clearly that he was the one who was late, even though he had arrived first. She sat down across from him, The barista set her usual order in front of her without being asked. Cade looked at it, then at her, and the expression on his face, open, something close to undefended, was nothing at all like the man she had made herself invisible for. 6 years, she said. I know. We're going to be here for a while. I know that too. He wrapped both hands around his cup and looked at her with the full, undivided attention that had unsettled her 3 days ago and was beginning to feel like something she could get used to. I'm not going anywhere. The city moved past the window. The coffee was exactly how she liked it. Ottoline Voss, Director of Strategic Analysis, picked up her cup and decided that being seen was not, in the end, the dangerous thing she had spent 6 years believing it to be. It was just the thing that came next.